Imagine standing on an endless sea of grass, where the horizon has no end, where the wind never truly falls silent, and where every heartbeat of the earth seems to echo beneath the hooves of thousands of horses. Now imagine hearing a single name carried by that wind, a name so feared that kings abandoned their palaces, cities closed their gates, and entire civilizations prayed they would never see the banners that followed it. That name was Genghis Khan. History remembers him as a conqueror without equal. To some, he was a ruthless destroyer whose armies left burning cities behind them. To others, he was a visionary who united a fractured world, opened trade across continents, and built the largest contiguous empire humanity has ever known. But long before the legends, long before the victories, long before the world trembled at the thunder of Mongol horses, he was simply a hungry boy trying to survive another bitter winter. And that is where our story truly begins. The morning air was sharp enough to sting the lungs. Across the endless Mongolian steppe, the rising sun painted the grasslands with shades of gold. But there was little warmth in its light. The wind swept across the plains without mercy, bending the tall grass like waves upon a green ocean. There were no castles here, no stone roads, no towering cities, only scattered camps of nomadic families who lived as they had for generations, following their animals wherever fresh pasture could be found. Life on the steppe was beautiful. It was also unforgiving. A single storm could wipe out an entire herd. One harsh winter could bring starvation. Water was precious, food was never guaranteed, and weakness was a luxury no family could afford. Here, survival belonged not to the strongest, but to those who adapted faster than everyone else. Among these wandering tribes lived a respected chieftain named Yesuge. He was not a king. He did not rule an empire. His authority stretched only as far as the loyalty of those willing to follow him. Because on the Mongolian steppe, power was never inherited forever. It had to be earned every single day. One journey would change everything. Yesuge was traveling with his young son, a quiet boy named Temujin, whose eyes seemed far older than his years. The purpose of the journey was simple: to arrange his son's future marriage with a girl named Borti, strengthening the bonds between two families. Such alliances were the foundation of life on the steppe. Friends today could become enemies tomorrow, and marriages often decided the fate of entire clans. The agreement was made. The family celebrated. For a brief moment, the future seemed secure. But destiny rarely announces itself with trumpets. Sometimes, it arrives disguised as an ordinary meal. On his journey home, Yasugi stopped among members of the Tatar tribe, old enemies who greeted him with smiles and hospitality. According to the customs of the steppe, refusing food would have been an insult, so he accepted. He ate, he thanked his hosts, and unknowingly, he swallowed poison. By the time he reached home, every breath had become a struggle. His strength disappeared with terrifying speed. Within days, the man who had protected his family for years was dead. Temujin was only a child. The grief had barely settled before another tragedy struck. The warriors who had sworn loyalty to Yesu gathered together. Temujin watched them carefully. Surely they would stand beside his family. Surely they would honor the memory of the man who had led them. Instead, one by one, they mounted their horses, turned away, and disappeared beyond the horizon. No battle, no farewell, no promises. Only silence. In a single afternoon, Temujin's family lost not only a father, but protection, status, and nearly every chance of survival. His mother, Holun, refused to surrender. She had once been carried away from her own tribe against her will, yet hardship had forged her into a woman stronger than many warriors. She gathered her children and looked toward the endless plains stretching before them. No one was coming to help. If they wished to live, they would have to save themselves. The following months became a battle against hunger itself. There were no overflowing granaries, no generous neighbors, no hidden treasure waiting to be found. The family survived by digging wild roots from frozen ground, catching fish in icy rivers, gathering berries whenever the seasons allowed, and hunting whatever small animals they could find. Sometimes they ate. Sometimes they did not. Every evening ended with the same uncertainty. Would tomorrow bring food or another empty stomach? The cold became an enemy that never slept. The wind seemed determined to strip away every ounce of hope they still possessed. Many children would have broken beneath such hardship. Temujin did not. He watched everything. He listened more than he spoke. Every betrayal became a lesson. Every struggle became training, without realizing it. The lonely boy abandoned by his tribe was slowly becoming someone entirely different. One afternoon, after returning from a hunt with little to show for his efforts, another conflict erupted within the family. Food had become dangerously scarce. Arguments over survival grew sharper with every passing day. Temujin's older half-brother, Bektar, often claimed the best portions for himself, insisting that age gave him authority. Perhaps under different circumstances, the disagreement would have faded. But starvation changes people. It makes patience disappear. It turns brothers into rivals. One evening, Temujin and his younger brother Kasar quietly climbed a nearby hillside with their bows. Below them stood Bektar. The wind carried no words, only silence. Then an arrow flew. History would forever remember the conqueror who defeated mighty empires. Few remember that before he ever faced kings, he faced his own family. The death of Bektar haunted Temujin's early life, but it also revealed something about the brutal world surrounding him. On the steppe, mercy could cost lives. Difficult choices arrived long before adulthood, yet destiny had not finished testing him. Far from it, months later, warriors from the Taichud tribe surrounded Temujin. They had watched him carefully. The son of Yesuge was growing older. If left alone, he might one day seek revenge. Better to deal with him now. Temujin was captured. A heavy wooden collar was locked around his neck. The weight made running nearly impossible. Every movement reminded him that he was no longer free. The warriors laughed to them. He was just another defeated boy. No one believed he would ever matter. Night fell. The guards relaxed. The campfire burned lower. Temujin waited, not for rescue, not for mercy, for opportunity. When it finally came, he ran. The wooden collar slammed painfully against his shoulders as he sprinted into the darkness. Behind him came angry shouts, then the pounding of horses. The chase had begun. With nowhere else to go, Temujin threw himself into a nearby river, disappearing beneath the cold water. He hid among reeds, barely allowing himself to breathe. The search continued for hours. Torches moved along the riverbank. Warriors scanned every shadow. One wrong movement, one careless breath, and his story would end before it had truly begun. Then something extraordinary happened. One of the men searching for him found the frightened young prisoner. He could have called the others. He could have earned praise from his leaders. Instead, he looked into the eyes of the exhausted boy and made a choice that would quietly change history. He said nothing. He allowed Temujin to remain hidden. Later, under the cover of darkness, he helped him escape completely. It was an act of kindness with enormous consequences. Years later, when Temujin ruled millions, he never forgot those who had shown loyalty when he possessed nothing, not wealth, not power, not even freedom. He remembered always, because he understood something most rulers never did. A kingdom can be built with fear, but an empire is built by loyalty. That single belief would soon unite tribes that had spent generations killing one another. It would transform scattered horsemen into the greatest military force the medieval world had ever seen. But before Temujin could become Genghis Khan, he would first have to survive the greatest betrayal of his life, and it would come from the one man he once called brother. The man who would one day command hundreds of thousands of warriors did not yet possess an army. He did not own a palace. He had no crown resting upon his head. What he possessed was something far more dangerous, a growing reputation. Across the windswept plains of Mongolia, stories began traveling faster than horses. Around countless campfires, shepherds, traders, hunters, and wandering clans spoke quietly of a young man who had escaped captivity, survived starvation, and refused to surrender when every reason to do so stood before him. Some dismissed the stories as exaggerations. Others listened carefully. On the steppe, strength attracted followers. But resilience inspired belief. Temujin understood something many tribal leaders never did. People did not willingly risk their lives for power alone. They followed hope. Every warrior who rode beside him believed they were riding toward a future better than the one they had known. It was a simple idea, yet it would change history. Spring returned to the grasslands. The frozen rivers began to flow once again. Wildflowers spread across the endless plains, and thousands of horses grazed beneath an open sky, so vast it seemed to swallow the earth itself. Temujin had one promise left to fulfill. Years earlier, before his father's death, a marriage had been arranged between him and a young woman named Bert. Now he returned to keep that promise. When he arrived at her family's camp, Bert recognized him immediately. Years had changed him. The cheerful boy she once knew had disappeared. Standing before her was a man shaped by hardship. His face carried quiet determination. His eyes held the weight of someone who had already survived more suffering than most experienced in an entire lifetime. Yet there was something else, hope. Despite everything he had lost, he still believed tomorrow could be better. The marriage was celebrated according to the customs of the steppe. There were horses' songs echoed across the plains, families exchanged gifts. For one precious night, laughter replaced fear. Temujin finally had something he had not possessed since childhood. A home not built from stone, not protected by walls, but strengthened by trust. Among the wedding gifts was a magnificent sable coat, soft, dark, and worth more than many families would earn in years. Most young men would have kept such a valuable gift. Temujin did not. Instead, he mounted his horse and rode for days across the steppe until he reached the camp of one of the most powerful leaders in Mongolia. His name was Togrul, the ruler of the Karit tribe. Many years earlier, Togrul had sworn brotherhood with Temujin's father. The old alliance still carried meaning. When Temujin arrived, he presented the priceless sable coat as a gift, not because he wished to impress Togrul, because he wished to build something far more valuable than wealth, trust. Togrul accepted both the gift and the young man standing before him. From that moment forward, Temujin gained more than an ally. He gained legitimacy. Other tribes began paying attention. If the mighty Togrul believed in this young leader, perhaps there was something extraordinary about him after all. But destiny has a cruel habit of testing happiness. It never allows peace to last for long. The attack came before dawn. Most of the camp was asleep. Only a few guards remained awake beneath the fading stars. Then, dogs began barking, horses grew restless. Before anyone could react, shadows burst from the darkness. The Merkit tribe, their warriors swept into the camp with terrifying speed. Arrows flew. Families scattered. Children cried. The quiet morning exploded into chaos. Temujin reached for his bow, shouting for his people to flee, but the attack had already broken through the camp. The Merkits were not there to steal livestock. They wanted something else. Someone else. Borta. Years earlier, Temujin's father had taken Holun, Temujin's mother, from the Merkit people, beginning a blood feud that neither side had forgotten. Now they sought revenge, not against the dead, against the living. Bert was dragged away before Temujin could reach her. Her cries disappeared into the darkness as the Merkit riders vanished across the plains. Silence returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of loss. Temujin stood motionless. The wind tugged at his clothing. The ashes of dying campfires drifted into the sky. Everything he had rebuilt, everything he had fought to protect, had been taken from him once again. Many men would have surrendered to grief. Others would have charged recklessly after the enemy. Temujin did neither. Instead, he began to think. He understood a painful truth. Alone, he could never defeat the Merkit tribe. Not yet. If he wished to save Bert, he would need allies. Real allies, the kind willing to ride into battle beside him. There was only one place to begin. Togrul did not hesitate. When Temujin asked for help, the old ruler remembered his oath to Yesuge. He agreed immediately, but one army would not be enough. Temujin needed another. There was only one man capable of providing it, a man who had once shared his dreams, a man he loved like family, Jamuka. As children, Temujin and Jamuka had become *Anda blood brothers. Among the Mongols, this bond was sacred. It meant more than friendship. It meant loyalty stronger than blood itself. When Jamuka received Temujin's message, he accepted soon. 3 armies gathered beneath fluttering banners. Thousands of horsemen filled the horizon. The earth trembled beneath countless hooves. For the first time in his life, Temujin was not standing alone. The campaign against the Merkits was swift. The combined forces attacked before sunrise. Arrows darkened the morning sky. Horsemen swept across the plains with astonishing speed. The Merkits never expected such unity among tribes that usually distrusted one another. Their lines collapsed, their camps fell, panic spread. And in the middle of the chaos, Temujin found Bort. She was alive. The moment she saw him, relief overcame every fear she had carried since her capture. No words were needed. After everything they had endured, simply finding one another again was enough. The journey home felt different. Temujin had achieved far more than rescuing his wife. He had discovered something that would become the foundation of an empire. When divided, the tribes were weak. When united, no enemy could stand against them. It seemed obvious. Yet no leader before him had managed to make it last. Temujin intended to change that forever. As months passed, more warriors arrived at his camp. Some came seeking opportunity. Others sought protection. Many simply wished to follow the man whose victories seemed impossible. But Temujin welcomed them differently than other tribal chiefs. He did not ask first. "Who was your father?" he asked. "Can I trust you?" A poor shepherd could earn command over noble warriors if he proved himself. A prince could lose everything if he betrayed his people. It was a revolutionary idea. On the steppe, noble birth had always determined status. Temujin cared far more about ability. Some older chiefs considered this insulting, dangerous, even outrageous. But ordinary warriors loved him for it. For the first time, courage mattered more than ancestry. Skill mattered more than family name. Loyalty mattered more than wealth. His followers became fiercely devoted, not because they feared him, because they believed in him. And that frightened the old tribal leaders more than any sword ever could. Among those watching carefully was Jamuka. At first, he celebrated Temujin's growing success, but slowly, almost invisibly, something changed. Where Temujin saw equals, Jamuka saw hierarchy. Where Temujin rewarded merit, Jamuka defended tradition. Where Temujin dreamed of one united Mongolia, Jamuka believed the old ways should remain. Political disagreements slowly became personal wounds. Respect became rivalry. Friendship became suspicion. Neither man spoke openly about it. Neither admitted what was happening, but everyone around them could feel it, like dark clouds gathering before a storm. The 2 blood brothers who had once sworn eternal loyalty now stood at the beginning of separate paths. One path would lead toward unity, the other toward civil war. And before the world could fear the name Genghis Khan, the future conqueror would first have to defeat the man who knew him better than anyone else alive. The first signs of betrayal were almost impossible to see. There was no declaration of war. No messenger galloped across the steppe carrying threats. No army appeared on the horizon. Instead, it began with whispers. Whispers around campfires. Whispers carried by traders crossing the grasslands. Whispers that asked the same dangerous question: who should truly lead the Mongols? For generations, the answer had always been the same: the most noble blood, the oldest traditions, the strongest clan. But Temujin was changing those rules. Every warrior who joined his growing camp could feel it. If a shepherd fought bravely, he might command 100 men. If the son of a great chief failed his people, he could lose everything. It was a new way of thinking. To ordinary families, it was hope. To powerful nobles, it was a threat. And no one felt that threat more deeply than Jamuka. Not long ago, they had shared meals beneath the same sky. They had hunted together, lawed together, dreamed together. As boys, they had sworn the sacred oath of *Anda, blood brothers bound by loyalty stronger than family. Now they rarely looked each other in the eye. The distance between their camps grew with every passing season. One evening, Jamuka sat quietly outside his jur, watching the sun disappear beyond the endless horizon. A trusted warrior approached him. "They're leaving." Jamuka didn't answer. The warrior continued. "Another clan rode to Temujin this morning. Silence. They say he rewards courage. Still silence. They say every man has a chance beside him." Jamuka slowly clenched his fist. He had spent years building alliances. He belonged to one of the oldest noble families on the steppe. Leadership, in his eyes, was inherited, earned through birth, protected by tradition. Yet this young man, his own blood brother, was convincing warriors to abandon centuries of custom, not with fear, not with gold, but with belief. Jamuka finally spoke. "If this continues," his voice was calm, "there will be no place left for the old ways." Temujin sensed the growing tensions long before anyone warned him. He had learned through years of hardship to notice what others ignored: a missing messenger, an unusually quiet ally, a delayed reply. Small details often revealed the largest dangers. One night, while sharing fermented mare's milk with his closest companions, an elderly warrior asked him a simple question. "Do you trust Jamuka?" The campfire crackled softly. Temujin stared into the flames before answering. "I trust the man he was." The old warrior lowered his eyes. "And the man he is now?" For the first time, Temujin had no answer. The split finally came during a great gathering of tribes. Hundreds of tents covered the plains. Thousands of horses grazed nearby. Leaders met to discuss alliances, trade, and the future of Mongolia. What should have been a celebration slowly became something else. The atmosphere changed. Groups formed quietly. Old rivalries resurfaced. Every conversation seemed to end with the same question: Temujin or Jamuka? Neither man raised his voice, neither insulted the other. Yet everyone understood. Two visions for Mongolia now stood facing each other. Jamuka believed that noble families should continue ruling as they always had. Temujin believed leadership belonged to those who proved worthy. Neither vision could survive if the other prevailed. Without another word, the gathering ended. Tribes mounted their horses. Dust filled the air. One by one, they chose their side. When the last riders disappeared into the distance, Mongolia had become two nations without drawing a single border. War was no longer possible to avoid. The first battle came sooner than anyone expected. Scouts returned at dawn. Jamuka is coming. Temujin stood upon a small hill overlooking the open plains. Far away, dark shapes appeared against the horizon. At first, they looked like shadows. Then, the sunlight caught thousands of spearheads. The earth began to shake. Horse after horse, banner after banner, an entire army advancing beneath the endless sky. Temujin mounted his horse. Around him, his warriors checked their bows, tightened leather armor, whispered quiet prayers. Many had never fought in a battle this large. Some were afraid. Temujin noticed. He rode slowly through the ranks. He did not shout. He did not promise easy victory. Instead, he said something unexpected. Today, every warrior listened. "You are not fighting for me." The silence deepened. "You are fighting for the future your children deserve." No speech could have been more powerful. The fear remained. But now, it had purpose. The armies met beneath a cloudless sky. There were no drums, no trumpets, only the wind. Then, thousands of arrows darkened the heavens. The battle exploded. Horsemen charged across the plains with breathtaking speed. Archers twisted in their saddles, releasing arrows while riding at full gallop. Dust swallowed entire formations. War cries echoed across the grasslands. Steel met steel. Men disappeared beneath racing horses. The steppe itself seemed alive. Temujin fought near the center of his army. He moved constantly, refusing to remain where the enemy expected. Whenever one part of his line weakened, he rode there personally, not because he needed to, because his warriors fought harder whenever they saw him. Jamuka watched from a nearby hill. His commanders urged another attack, another charge, another volley of arrows, yet something troubled him. Temujin's soldiers never seemed to break. Even when pushed backward, they regrouped. Even when surrounded, they found a way through. They trusted one another. That trust had become stronger than fear. Jamuka realized too late. He was no longer fighting scattered tribes. He was fighting an idea, and ideas are far harder to defeat than armies. The battle raged until sunset. Neither side escaped without terrible losses. The grasslands that morning had been green. By evening, they were stained red. As darkness approached, Jamuka ordered a retreat. His warriors withdrew into the night. Temujin did not celebrate. He walked silently among the wounded. Some called his name. Others simply reached for his hand. He stopped beside every injured warrior he could, not because they were officers, not because they were famous, because they had stood beside him. Every life mattered that night. No music echoed through the camp. No victory feast was prepared. Only quiet voices, crackling fires, and the painful realization that defeating strangers was easier than fighting someone who had once been family. Days later, terrible news spread across the steppe. After retreating, Jamuka captured several tribal leaders who had abandoned him during the conflict. Many expected imprisonment, perhaps ransom. Instead, Jamuka ordered an execution so cruel that even seasoned warriors struggled to speak of it. The prisoners were boiled alive. The story spread from camp to camp with shocking speed. Fear followed it everywhere. Some obeyed Jamuka because they feared him. But fear rarely creates loyalty. Temujin understood this instinctively. When the news reached his camp, he said very little. He didn't need to. His warriors had already made their decision. They knew which leader they wished to follow. Not because one was stronger, because one inspired hope and the other inspired terror. From that day forward, tribes began arriving in greater numbers than ever before. Entire families packed their belongings. Warriors brought their horses, blacksmiths carried their tools, hunters, merchants, elders, children. They all rode toward Temujin's growing camp, not simply to join an army, to become part of something entirely new. For the first time in history, the dream of a united Mongolia no longer seemed impossible. It seemed inevitable. But beyond the eastern mountains, another powerful enemy had begun watching every step Temujin took. An empire far richer than any tribe, far larger than any rival clan. Its rulers believed the conflicts of the steppe would never threaten them. They could not have been more mistaken, because the man they dismissed as just another tribal chief was about to unite the Mongols. And once he did, the world itself would become his battlefield. For centuries, the rulers of great kingdoms had looked toward the Mongolian steppe with little concern. To them, it was a distant wilderness, a place of endless grass, wandering tribes, and people who fought one another more often than they threatened anyone beyond their own borders. Chinese emperors dismissed them as scattered nomads. Merchants crossed the steppe only when necessary. Foreign envoys rarely stayed longer than required. No one imagined that these windswept plains were quietly giving birth to the greatest military power the world would ever see. Because history often hides its greatest revolutions in places the powerful refuse to notice. The victory over Jamuka changed everything. Temujin's camp no longer looked like the small gathering of struggling families it had once been. Every week, more riders appeared on the horizon. Some arrived carrying gifts. Others came with nothing but exhausted horses and hope. Entire clans packed their belongings onto wooden carts, pulled by oxen and camels, leaving behind old loyalties to stand beneath Temujin's banner. The camp stretched farther each month. Hundreds of white gurs dotted the grasslands like stars scattered across the earth. Blacksmiths worked from sunrise until long after sunset. The ringing of hammers against glowing iron echoed across the valley. Women stitched saddles, repaired armor, and prepared supplies. Children chased one another between grazing horses, unaware that they were growing up in the heart of a movement that would reshape the world. It no longer felt like the camp of a tribal chief. It felt like the beginning of a nation. Yet Temujin refused to let success blind him. Every evening after the day's work was finished, he rode alone across the steppe. There, with only the wind for company, he studied the horizon. He knew something many leaders forgot. The moment a man believes he cannot be defeated, his defeat has already begun. One cold evening, Temujin gathered his closest companions around a fire. Among them were men who had followed him through hunger, exile, captivity, and war. Boorchu, Jelma, Subutai. Some had been born into noble families, others had started life as ordinary shepherds. Yet around Temujin's fire, rank meant nothing, only loyalty mattered. He looked at each of them before speaking. "We have defeated tribes." The men nodded. "We have survived betrayal." Again they nodded. "But if we remain divided," he reached down and picked up a single arrow. With almost no effort, he snapped it in two. The dry crack echoed in the silence. Then he picked up a bundle of arrows tied tightly together. He tried to break them. They refused to bend. No explanation was necessary. Every man around the fire understood. One warrior could be broken. A united people could not. That lesson would soon become the foundation of an empire. Temujin began transforming his followers in ways no leader before him had dared. He no longer organized his army according to tribes. That system, he believed, encouraged old rivalries. Instead, he mixed warriors from different clans into the same military units. Men who had once been enemies now trained, hunted, and fought side by side. At first, many resisted. Old grudges did not disappear overnight. Arguments erupted. Fights broke out. Some even threatened to leave. Temujin remained unmoved. "If you cannot trust the man beside you," he told them, "you cannot build the future before you." Slowly, something remarkable happened. The old divisions began to fade. A warrior no longer saw the man next to him as a member of another tribe. He saw him as a brother in arms. It was a quiet revolution, one that no enemy fully understood until it was far too late. Training became relentless. Every morning before sunrise, riders gathered on the open plains. Comets echoed through the cold air. Horses thundered across the grasslands in perfect formation. Archers practiced until their fingers bled. Young recruits learned to fire arrows in every direction without slowing their horses. They learned to communicate with flags during daylight and torches after sunset. They mastered feigned retreats, pretending to flee, only to lure enemies into deadly traps. Every movement had a purpose. Every exercise prepared them for real war. Temujin believed battles were not won by courage alone. They were won through discipline, through preparation, through the ability to think clearly while chaos surrounded you. Many outsiders called the Mongols wild barbarians. In truth, they were becoming one of the most organized military forces the medieval world had ever seen. One afternoon, a frightened young warrior accidentally rode his horse into the wrong formation during training. The mistake disrupted dozens of riders. Several officers expected harsh punishment. Temujin called the young man forward. The soldier lowered his head, convinced his life was over. Instead, Temujin asked only one question. "What did you learn?" The young warrior looked up, confused. I won't make the same mistake again." Temujin smiled slightly. "Good." Then he sent him back to training. His commanders exchanged surprised glances. Later, one asked why he had shown mercy. Temujin answered quietly, "A man who learns from failure becomes stronger." He paused. "A man who fears failure learns nothing." His words spread quickly through the camp. The soldiers respected him even more, because they knew discipline did not mean cruelty. It meant growth. As Temujin's influence expanded, neighboring rulers grew uneasy. Among the most concerned was the Jin dynasty in northern China. For years, the Jin emperors had controlled politics on the steppe by encouraging tribes to fight one another. A divided Mongolia was easy to manipulate. A united Mongolia was something entirely different. Reports arrived almost weekly. The tribes are gathering. They follow one leader. They obey without question. At first, the Jin court dismissed the warnings. "Nomads unite every generation," one official remarked. "They always fall apart." Another laughed. "They cannot threaten an empire of millions." The emperor listened, but he underestimated the man beyond the northern frontier. History has often been shaped by leaders who ignored small dangers until they became impossible to stop. Far away, another figure watched Temujin's rise with mixed emotions. Jamuka. Defeat had not destroyed him, but it had changed him. His army was smaller now. Many allies had abandoned him, yet pride remained. One evening, standing alone beneath a sky filled with stars, He whispered to himself, "I taught him to dream." His voice carried no hatred, only sadness. And now, he closed his eyes. He dreams bigger than I ever could. For the first time, Jamuka realized the painful truth: the future no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the man he had once called brother. By the spring of 1206, the grasslands buzzed with anticipation. Messengers rode in every direction. Leaders from tribes across Mongolia were summoned to a great gathering unlike any before it. Thousands answered the call: warriors, elders, shamans, blacksmiths, merchants, families. The steppe filled with people as far as the eye could see. They had not gathered for war. They had come to decide the future of an entire nation. Temujin stood quietly outside his tent before dawn. The same wind that had once carried the cries of his starving childhood brushed against his face. He remembered everything: his father's death, the hunger, the betrayal, the wooden collar around his neck, the desperate escape through icy waters, the friends who had saved him, the enemies who had tried to destroy him. Every step, every wound, every sacrifice had led to this single day. As the first rays of sunlight rose above the endless horizon, thousands of eyes turned toward him. In a few moments, the scattered tribes of Mongolia would speak with one voice. And when they did, Temujin would leave history behind, because from this day forward, the world would know him by a different name: Genghis Khan. The wind swept across the great assembly, as if the steppe itself understood that history was about to change. For miles, the grasslands had disappeared beneath a sea of white gurs, grazing horses, fluttering banners, and thousands upon thousands of people who had traveled from every corner of Mongolia. Warriors stood beside shepherds. Tribal elders stood beside young boys who had never seen such a gathering in their lives. Never before had so many tribes answered the same call. Never before had so many old enemies stood together without reaching for their weapons. The air carried excitement, curiosity, and something even more powerful: hope. As the first light of dawn spread across the horizon, the elders slowly stepped forward. Their faces were weathered by decades of wind and winter. These were men who had witnessed endless wars between tribes, watched friendships dissolve into bloodshed, and buried generations who had died believing that the Mongols would never know peace. Today they wanted something different. A respected shaman raised his hands toward the endless blue sky. Among the Mongols, the eternal blue heaven, Tengri, was believed to guide the destiny of rulers and nations alike. The gathering fell completely silent. Even the horses seemed strangely calm. No child cried, no warrior whispered. Only the wind continued its endless journey across the plains. The elder looked toward Temujin. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then, before thousands of witnesses, he declared that the tribes had chosen one leader, not for one season, not for one battle, but for all Mongolia. A roar erupted across the grasslands. Banners rose into the sky. Warriors struck their shields with their bows. Men embraced. Women wept. Children laughed without fully understanding what they had just witnessed. At that moment, Temujin ceased to exist. From this day forward, he would be known as Genghis Khan. The meaning of the title is still debated by historians, but to those standing on the steppe that morning, its meaning was unmistakable. There would be one nation, one people, one Khan. Many rulers would have celebrated with feasts lasting for weeks. Genghis Khan did something unexpected. The very next morning, he went back to work because he understood a truth that many kings never learned. Winning power is difficult. Keeping it is far more difficult. He summoned the leaders of every tribe. Some expected rewards. Others expected punishment for past rivalries. Instead, Genghis surprised them all. "The tribes are finished," he said calmly. A murmur spread through the gathering. He continued, "From today, there are no Taychud, no Merkit, no Karit, no Tatar. There are only Mongols." The words settled over the crowd like a heavy silence. For generations, a person's tribe had defined everything: their family, their allies, their enemies, their future. Now, Genghis Khan was asking them to abandon identities older than memory itself. It seemed impossible. Yet somehow, when he spoke, people believed him. He knew that unity could not survive on words alone. It required laws. Fair laws, clear laws. For centuries, tribal disputes had been settled according to custom, revenge, or whoever happened to possess the larger army. Genghis intended to end that. He introduced a legal code later remembered as the asterisk yasa. Some parts have been lost to history, but its purpose was unmistakable: discipline, order, responsibility. The law applied to nobles and commoners alike. Stealing livestock brought punishment. Cowardice in battle was unacceptable. Officers who abused their authority faced consequences. Loyal service was rewarded regardless of birth. For perhaps the first time on the steppe, justice was beginning to matter more than bloodline. His followers noticed, so did his enemies. The army itself changed beyond recognition. No longer would warriors gather only when their own tribe called for war. Now every soldier belonged to a permanent military system. Groups of 10 men formed a unit. 10 units became 100. 10 hundreds became 1,000. 10,000s formed a mighty force known as asterisk tumen. It was brilliantly simple. Every man knew exactly where he belonged. Every commander knew his responsibilities. Oars traveled through the ranks with astonishing speed. If one officer fell in battle, another immediately took command. Confusion disappeared. Discipline replaced chaos. Many kingdoms possessed larger populations. Many had richer cities. Few possessed an army organized with such precision. Training became even harsher. Genghis Khan often rode among his soldiers without announcing himself. He watched quietly. He listened. He noticed everything. One afternoon, he observed a young archer struggling to hit distant targets while others laughed at his failures. Instead of joining them, Genghis dismounted. He asked the young man for his bow. The nervous soldier handed it over with trembling hands. Genghis drew the string released. The arrow struck the center of the target. He handed the bow back. The bow was never the problem. The young soldier looked confused. Genghis smiled. Neither were you. He adjusted the young man's stance by only a few inches. Again, the second arrow flew. This time, it struck true. The soldiers watching never forgot what they had witnessed. Their Khan expected excellence, but he also taught people how to achieve it. That was the difference. As Mongolia grew stronger, merchants traveling between China and Central Asia carried astonishing stories. There is one ruler now. The tribes no longer fight one another. Their army moves faster than anyone believed possible. Some listeners dismissed the rumors. Others became uneasy. One merchant, after crossing the steppes safely, reportedly remarked, "They ride as if every horse shares one mind." It sounded like an exaggeration. Soon, the world would discover it was not. Not everyone accepted the new order. Several tribal leaders secretly plotted rebellion. They believed Genghis Khan had risen too quickly. Some feared losing their privileges. Others simply refused to obey a man they once considered their equal. The conspirators met beneath the cover of darkness. Their plan seemed simple: strike before Genghis became too powerful, remove him, restore the old ways. But one among them hesitated. He had watched Genghis closely for years. Finally he spoke. "If we fail," the others turned toward him, "there will never be another chance." No one answered because everyone understood the man they planned to overthrow was no ordinary chief. He had survived hunger, captivity, betrayal, civil war. Every attempt to destroy him had somehow made him stronger. Still, their pride refused to surrender. The conspiracy moved forward. News of the plot reached Genghis before the conspirators could act. His intelligence network had quietly become one of his greatest strengths. Messengers, scouts, travelers, hunters. Information flowed toward him from every direction. Nothing remained hidden for long. When the conspirators were captured, many expected a massacre. Instead, Genghis separated them into two groups. Those driven by ambition alone faced severe punishment, but those who admitted their mistakes and swore genuine loyalty were spared. Some even entered his service. His commanders questioned the decision. "Why spare men who betrayed you?" Genghis looked toward the endless horizon before answering. "A man forced to obey serves with fear." He paused. "A man forgiven serves with gratitude." Not everyone deserved mercy, but those who did often became his most loyal followers. It was another lesson his enemies failed to understand. Far beyond Mongolia, the rulers of neighboring kingdoms continued watching with growing concern. Reports now spoke not of scattered horsemen, but of a disciplined nation. One official at the court of the Jin dynasty warned the emperor, "If this Khan turns his eyes south," he hesitated, "our northern frontier will never be the same." The emperor waved the warning aside. The Great Wall has protected China for centuries. The official lowered his head. He dared not argue, but deep inside, he feared the emperor was placing his faith in stone against a man whose greatest weapon was not his army, it was his mind, because Genghis Khan was no longer thinking about uniting Mongolia. That dream had already become reality. Now, standing atop a ridge overlooking the endless steppe, he turned his horse toward the south, toward kingdoms richer than anything his people had ever imagined, toward cities whose walls had never fallen, toward an empire convinced it could never be conquered. The world beyond the grasslands had ignored the rise of Genghis Khan. It would not ignore what came next. For generations, the Great Wall had stood as a symbol of confidence. Its watchtowers stretched across mountains and valleys, like a stone dragon guarding the northern frontier of China. Soldiers patrolled its battlements day and night, believing no enemy from the steppe could ever threaten the empire beyond. To those living inside the Jin dynasty, the wall represented safety. To Genghis Khan, it represented a challenge. He had spent years studying his enemies before ever drawing his sword against them. He listened to merchants who traveled between kingdoms. He questioned prisoners instead of simply executing them. He welcomed defectors who understood foreign armies. Every piece of information mattered, because Genghis believed something few commanders truly understood. A battle should be won before it is ever fought. One evening, beneath a sky crowded with stars, Genghis gathered his generals. Around the fire sat the men who had risen beside him through years of hardship: Subutai, Jebe, Boorchu, Mukali. They were no longer simply warriors. They were the architects of an empire still in its infancy. A map drawn carefully on stretched leather lay across the ground. Small stones marked rivers. Pieces of carved wood represented cities. Genghis pointed toward the south. The Jin believed their walls protect them. No one interrupted. He moved one of the wooden markers around the edge of the map, "So we will not attack the wall." His generals exchanged curious glances. "We will go where they believe no army can go." A slow smile appeared on Subutai's face. He understood immediately. While the enemy watched the gates, the Mongols would ride around them. Preparations began in silence. Unlike many kingdoms, the Mongols carried no enormous supply wagons. No endless lines of servants followed the army. Every warrior was expected to survive on his own. Each rider often traveled with several horses, changing mounts throughout the journey so none became exhausted. Fresh horses meant unmatched speed. An enemy might ride for 3 days. A Mongol army could cover nearly twice the distance. That speed would soon become their greatest weapon. In the spring of 1211, the campaign began. From a distance, it looked as though the earth itself had come alive. Thousands of horsemen moved across the steppe in disciplined formations. Their banners danced in the wind. The thunder of hooves rolled across the plains like distant storms. Dust rose behind them in great clouds that stretched for miles. Villagers watched in stunned silence as the seemingly endless columns disappeared toward the southern horizon. No one had ever seen an army move like this. No one understood what was coming. The Jin commanders received reports almost daily. Scouts have spotted Mongol riders. More banners have appeared. They continue moving south. Most officials remained calm. The wall will stop them. The mountain passes are secure. They cannot cross in large numbers. Confidence spread through the court. After all, the Jin dynasty ruled millions of people. Its cities were enormous. Its armies vastly outnumbered anything the Mongols could field. How could wandering horsemen possibly threaten such a civilization? It was the same mistake countless rulers would make. They measured strength by numbers. Genghis measured it by discipline. The first major clash came near the mountain passes. Jin soldiers waited behind strong defensive positions. Heavy infantry stood shoulder to shoulder. Crossbowmen lined the ridges. Their commanders expected the Mongols to launch repeated frontal assaults until exhaustion forced them to retreat. Instead, something strange happened. The Mongol cavalry charged forward with terrifying speed. Arrows filled the sky. Then, just before reaching the enemy lines, they turned around. The Jin soldiers cheered. "They're running!" Trumpets sounded. The order to pursue echoed across the battlefield. Thousands of Jin troops broke formation and rushed after the retreating horsemen. Exactly as Genghis had hoped, the fleeing Mongols scattered across the hills. The Jin army followed, believing victory was within reach. Then, the horns sounded from behind distant ridges. Fresh Mongol cavalry appeared from the forests. More riders emerged from both flanks. Entire divisions swept forward. The retreat had never been real. It had been a trap. Within moments, the pursuing Jin soldiers found themselves surrounded. Panic spread faster than commands. Formations collapsed. Officers shouted conflicting orders. The battlefield dissolved into chaos. The Mongols attacked from every direction, never remaining still, firing arrows while galloping at astonishing speed. The Jin army had trained to fight enemies who stood before them, not enemies who seemed to appear and disappear like the wind itself. By sunset, the battlefield belonged to Genghis Khan. Word of the defeat reached the Jin capital with unbelievable speed. Some refused to believe it. A misunderstanding, a minor skirmish, the reports are exaggerated. But survivors soon arrived, their armor broken, their horses exhausted, their faces pale with disbelief. One officer knelt before the emperor. "I have never seen men fight like them." The throne room fell silent. "They attack where they are weakest." He struggled to find the words. "And somehow they are strongest." Another official spoke. "They do not fear death." The officer slowly shook his head. "No," his voice trembled. "They fear failure." Victory after victory followed. Fortresses once believed untouchable surrendered. Supply depots burned. Military outposts disappeared almost overnight, yet Genghis rarely celebrated. Every conquered position became another lesson. He carefully questioned engineers, blacksmiths, scholars, administrators. Unlike many conquerors, he did not destroy useful knowledge. He collected it. Chinese engineers taught the Mongols how siege machines worked. Captured craftsmen built stronger weapons. Experienced officials explained how large cities functioned. Every conquest strengthened the next. The empire was not simply expanding, it was learning. One afternoon, after a successful campaign, a young warrior rode beside Genghis. The soldier could barely contain his excitement. "We are unstoppable!" Genghis looked ahead without smiling. "No," the young man frowned. "We have won every battle." Genghis nodded. "And that is when men become careless." The warrior fell silent. Genghis continued. "Never believe victory belongs to you." He glanced toward the distant mountains. "Believe only that you have earned another chance to fight tomorrow." Those words spread quickly through the ranks. His army remained disciplined because its leader refused to become arrogant. As the months passed, fear began traveling faster than the Mongol cavalry. Entire towns abandoned their homes before the army even arrived. Merchants altered trade routes. Messengers rode day and night carrying desperate warnings. Parents frightened unruly children with a single sentence: "The Mongols are coming." The name Genghis Khan was no longer whispered only on the steppe. Now it echoed through palaces, markets, temples, and royal courts. Kings who had never cared about distant Mongolia suddenly demanded maps. Generals studied unfamiliar terrain. Diplomats searched for allies. The world had finally begun paying attention. But Genghis Khan was already thinking beyond northern China. Far to the west lay another empire, one overflowing with wealth, one whose ruler would make a single catastrophic decision, a decision born from pride, a decision that would unleash one of the most devastating campaigns in all of history. And when that moment came, even the victories against the Jin would seem like only the beginning. Victory changed the Mongols, but it did not change Genghis Khan. That was the difference. Every captured fortress, every defeated army, every banner lowered before him only confirmed what he had believed since the days of hunger and exile. No empire was invincible, no wall was too high, no king ruled forever. The only question that mattered was this, who would adapt and who would refuse? Because history had taught him a lesson that every ruler eventually learned. Those who refused to change became stories told by others. While his generals celebrated another successful campaign against the Jin dynasty, Genghis rode alone through the conquered lands. He passed villages where frightened families watched from behind half-open doors. Fields of wheat stretched farther than the eye could see. Stone bridges crossed wide rivers unlike anything found on the Mongolian steppe. To many Mongol warriors, these places felt like another world. To Genghis, they were a classroom. He spoke with farmers. He questioned blacksmiths. He observed how cities stored grain, how roads connected provinces, and how officials governed millions of people. He had not come only to conquer. He had come to understand. A commander who ignored knowledge would win battles. A commander who embraced knowledge could build an empire. One afternoon, a Chinese engineer was brought before him. The elderly man expected execution. His hands trembled as he knelt. Instead, Genghis asked a single question. "Can you build machines that break walls?" The old man looked up in surprise. "Yes, then build them." The engineer hesitated. "You will spare my life?" Genghis nodded. "And the lives of your family." The old man's eyes filled with disbelief. For years he had been taught that the Mongols were savage destroyers, yet the man before him valued skill more than revenge. Within weeks, engineers from conquered cities began working alongside Mongol craftsmen, trebuchets, catapults, siege towers. Knowledge flowed into the Mongol Empire like rivers feeding the sea. Every enemy defeated became another teacher. Every victory made the next one easier. Far to the west, beyond deserts, mountains, and endless trade routes, lay one of the richest kingdoms on earth, the Khwarezmian Empire. Its cities glittered with magnificent mosques, bustling markets, towering libraries, and prosperous merchants from every corner of Asia, silk from China, spices from India, silver from Persia, gold from distant lands. Everything passed through its thriving trade routes. Its ruler, Shah Muhammad II, considered himself one of the greatest monarchs alive. He commanded vast armies, controlled wealthy cities, ruled millions of people. When he heard reports about Genghis Khan's victories in China, he barely looked up from his throne. "They are only nomads." Those 4 words would cost him everything. Genghis Khan had no immediate desire to invade the West. His empire was still growing. His armies needed rest. Trade promised far greater rewards than another costly war, so he made an unexpected decision. He chose peace. A large caravan was prepared. Hundreds of camels carried silk, furs, precious metals, and valuable goods. Experienced merchants accompanied the expedition. Along with them traveled official ambassadors carrying gifts and a simple message: "We wish to trade." No threats, no demands, only friendship. It was an opportunity few rulers would reject. The caravan crossed deserts and mountains before finally reaching the frontier city of Otrar. Its governor, Inalchuk, watched the merchants enter through the city gates. The wealth they carried was astonishing. Yet, instead of seeing traders, he saw spies, driven by suspicion and perhaps greed. He made a disastrous choice. He ordered the entire caravan arrested. Their goods were confiscated. The merchants were accused of espionage. Soon afterward, they were executed. Hundreds of innocent men, dead their only crime, trusting the wrong ruler. When news reached Mongolia, silence filled Genghis Khan's camp. The surviving messenger knelt before him. His clothing was torn by weeks of desperate travel. His face was hollow with exhaustion. He told the entire story: every arrest, every execution, every stolen possession. The generals waited. Some expected Genghis to declare war immediately. He did not. Instead, he chose restraint. There may still be peace. Once again, he sent ambassadors, 3 men. Their mission was simple: demand justice, punish the governor responsible. preserve the friendship between their empires. It was Shah Muhammad's final opportunity to prevent disaster. Instead, he committed the greatest mistake of his reign. The ambassadors arrived at his court carrying the Khan's message. Rather than receiving them with honor, the Shah erupted in anger. One ambassador was executed. The others had their beards shaved, a grave insult in Mongol culture, and were sent back in humiliation. It was not merely an attack on diplomats, it was an insult directed personally at Genghis Khan. Across history, rulers have survived military defeats. Few survive arrogance. The 3 surviving riders reached Mongolia weeks later. Dust covered their faces. Their horses collapsed from exhaustion. When they entered Genghis Khan's camp, every conversation stopped. The Khan looked at them, then at their shaven faces. He needed no explanation. For several moments, no one spoke. Witnesses later recalled that Genghis walked alone to the top of a nearby hill. There, beneath the endless blue sky he believed watched over all things, he remained for hours, not speaking, not moving. Some said he prayed. Others believed he wrestled with the decision before him. Because once he gave the order, there would be no turning back. When he returned to camp, his expression had changed. The sorrow was gone. Only resolve remained. He gathered his generals. The Shah has murdered peace. His voice was calm. So we will answer with war. No cheers followed. The commanders understood the scale of what lay ahead. The Khwarezmian Empire was immense. Its cities were protected by massive walls. Its armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Many believed the campaign impossible. Genghis Khan believed something else. Every empire looked invincible, until the day it wasn't. Preparations unlike in before began across Mongolia. Messengers rode in every direction. Fresh horses were gathered, weapons repaired, supplies organized. Families watched silently as fathers and sons prepared for another campaign. Many sensed this war would be different. The enemy was farther away than any they had ever faced. The deserts were unforgiving, the mountains treacherous, the risks enormous. Yet no one doubted their leader. They had followed him through impossible victories before. Why would this be different? Before the army departed, Genghis stood before thousands of mounted warriors. The morning sun reflected from countless helmets. The only sound was the restless breathing of horses. He slowly looked across the sea of faces. Some were veterans. Others would ride into battle for the first time. He raised his hand. We did not seek this war. Silence. We sought peace. The wind carried his words across the assembled ranks. They answered with murder. His voice hardened. We ride not for revenge alone. He paused. But so that every kingdom will remember one truth. The army leaned forward. No messenger under the protection of the Mongols shall ever be harmed again. A roar shook the valley. Thousands of bows rose toward the sky. Horses stamped against the earth. The greatest campaign of Genghis Khan's life had begun. Ahead lay deserts that could swallow armies, cities richer than any the Mongols had ever seen, and an emperor who still believed he could stop the storm racing toward him. He had no idea that history was about to witness the complete destruction of one of the most powerful empires on earth. Before the first Mongol horse crossed into the lands of the Khwarezmian Empire, Shah Muhammad stood upon the balcony of his palace, looking over one of the richest realms in the world. From where he stood, the future appeared secure. Bustling markets overflowed with silk, spices, and precious metals. Caravans arrived every day from China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. Towering mosques reached toward the libraries held the knowledge of centuries, and thick city walls seemed impossible to breach. His empire stretched across much of Central Asia. Its cities were magnificent, its armies were enormous, its wealth seemed endless. To Shah Muhammad, the Mongols were nothing more than horsemen from the distant steppe, dangerous perhaps, but hardly a threat to an empire like his. When one of his advisors cautiously suggested that Genghis Khan might seek revenge for the murdered ambassadors, the Shah dismissed the warning with a wave of his hand. Let him come. The words echoed confidently through the hall. I will crush him. They would become some of the most expensive words ever spoken. Far to the east, beneath the endless blue sky of Mongolia, The greatest military campaign of Genghis Khan's life was already in motion. The army did not march as one massive column. Instead, it divided into several disciplined forces, each following a carefully planned route. To an outsider, it looked confusing. To Genghis, it was deliberate. If one army became trapped, another could strike elsewhere. If the enemy concentrated its defenses in one direction, Mongol horsemen would appear somewhere completely unexpected. The strategy demanded perfect coordination. It also demanded absolute trust. Fortunately for Genghis Khan, his generals were among the finest military minds of their age. Subutai, Jebe, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogedei, each commanded thousands of warriors, yet every one of them understood the larger plan. There would be no reckless charges, no battles fought for glory, only victory. The journey itself was almost as dangerous as the war. The Mongols crossed vast deserts where the heat shimmered like fire across the sand. Water was scarce, the days burned, the nights froze. More than once, scouts returned reporting that wells had been poisoned or destroyed by retreating enemy forces. Some armies would have turned back. The Mongols adapted. They carried dried meat that lasted for weeks. Each warrior knew how to survive with almost nothing. Fresh horses allowed them to move while others exhausted themselves. Years of life on the steppe had prepared them for hardship that would have broken many professional soldiers. Every obstacle only strengthened their determination. Meanwhile, Shah Muhammad made a decision that would haunt him forever. Instead of gathering his enormous army into one powerful force, he scattered it. Thousands of soldiers were assigned to defend individual cities. Each governor was told to hold his own walls. Each fortress would stand alone. At first glance, the strategy seemed reasonable. Surely the Mongols could never capture dozens of fortified cities at once. But Genghis Khan saw the weakness immediately. Separated armies could not help one another. One by one, they could be destroyed. The first great city to feel the full force of the Mongol invasion was Otrar, the place where the merchants and ambassadors had been betrayed. Its governor, Inalchuk, stood proudly upon the city walls as dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Thousands of Mongol riders surrounded the city. Then tens of thousands more arrived. The siege had begun. Unlike the nomadic warriors many expected, the Mongols now brought Chinese engineers, siege machines, and skilled craftsmen with them. Massive trebuchets hurled enormous stones against the walls. Arrows rained day and night. Tunnels were dug beneath defensive towers. Nothing was left to chance. The defenders fought bravely. Weeks turned into months. Still the city held. Inalchuk believed help would eventually arrive. It never did. Because Shah Muhammad had scattered his army so widely, no one came. Inside Otrar, hope slowly disappeared. Food became scarce. Families rationed every remaining grain. Soldiers who had once stood proudly upon the walls now struggled to remain awake from exhaustion. Each morning they looked toward the horizon, still no reinforcements. Outside the walls, the Mongols waited patiently. Genghis Khan never allowed impatience to destroy a campaign. He knew time itself could become a weapon. Every passing day weakened the defenders. Every passing day strengthened his position. Finally, after months of relentless pressure, the walls were breached. Mongol warriors poured into the city, street by street, house by house. The fighting was desperate. Inalchuk refused to surrender. He continued resisting until he was finally captured. According to later accounts, Genghis ordered a harsh execution for the governor whose actions had begun the war, making it clear that the murder of envoys would never go unanswered. The fall of Otrar sent shockwaves across Central Asia. If such a strong city could fall, what city was truly safe? Yet Otrar was only the beginning. The Shah still believed he understood his enemy. He assumed Genghis would continue advancing along predictable roads toward the richest cities. Instead, the impossible happened. The Mongols vanished. For days, there were almost no reports. Scouts searched desperately across the frontier. Nothing. Had they turned back? Had they changed direction? No one knew. Then, hundreds of miles away, panic erupted. The city of Bukhara reported that a massive Mongol army had appeared almost out of nowhere. The impossible route through the Kizilkum Desert, the route every commander believed uncrossable, had become Genghis Khan's highway. The defenders stared in disbelief. No one had expected an army to emerge from the desert itself. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. When Genghis Khan rode toward Bukhara, he did not see only another city. He saw the heart of an empire that believed itself untouchable. Its magnificent mosques reflected the morning sun. Its markets had welcomed merchants for centuries. Its scholars were known throughout the Islamic world. The walls were high, the gates were strong. But walls cannot defend against fear, and fear had arrived before the Mongols ever reached the gates. Refugees from Otrar carried horrifying stories. Villages emptied overnight. Some people fled before the first arrow was fired. Others stayed, praying the walls would protect them. The siege was brief, much shorter than anyone expected. The city's defenders fought courageously, but confusion spread quickly. The Mongols attacked with relentless discipline. Every weakness was exploited. Every hesitation became an opportunity. Soon, the gates were opened. Bukhara had fallen. According to Persian chroniclers, Genghis Khan entered the city and addressed its people. One famous account records him saying that, had they not committed great wrongs, heaven would not have sent a punishment like him. Historians continue to debate the exact wording, but the message reflected how his victories were understood by many at the time. The city that had once seemed untouchable now stood silent beneath Mongol banners. Far away, Shah Muhammad received the news. First Otrar, now Bukhara. His advisors stood speechless. Some urged him to gather every remaining soldier and face Genghis in one decisive battle. Others begged him to negotiate. The Shah could not decide. Every report contradicted the last. One messenger claimed the Mongols numbered 50,000. Another insisted there were 200,000. Some swore they appeared from the desert. Others believed they had crossed mountains no army could cross. The uncertainty became as deadly as the invasion itself. For the first time, the emperor who had once laughed at the Mongols began to understand the truth. He was no longer controlling the war. Genghis Khan was, and somewhere beyond the smoke of another conquered city, the Mongol leader had already set his eyes on an even greater prize. Samarkand, the jewel of the Khwarezmian Empire. If Samarkand fell, the empire itself might never recover. Smoke still drifted above the rooftops of Bukhara when the first riders left the city. They did not carry weapons, they carried fear. Across dusty roads and crowded trade routes, they galloped from village to village with the same desperate warning. The Mongols are coming. No one asked how many there were anymore. The number no longer mattered. What terrified people was something far worse. No one seemed able to stop them. Kingdoms that had existed for centuries were collapsing in weeks. Cities that believed themselves untouchable were opening their gates before the first stone struck their walls. The storm that had begun on the Mongolian steppe was now sweeping across Central Asia, and at its center rode one man who never seemed to hurry, because he knew time itself was fighting on his side. Genghis Khan gathered his generals outside Bukhara. A map lay across the ground, held flat by smooth river stones. His commanders expected the next target to be obvious: Samarkand, the greatest city in the empire, protected by towering walls, filled with experienced soldiers, home to enormous wealth. It was the kind of prize every conqueror dreamed of. Yet Genghis did not immediately order the advance. Instead, he studied the map in silence. Subutai finally broke the quiet. The Shah will defend Samarkand. Genghis nodded. He must. JB leaned closer. Then we attack before he gathers more troops. Again, Genghis shook his head. A faint smile crossed his face. If I were the Shah, his finger traced a path across the map. I would expect exactly that. The generals exchanged glances. They had fought beside him for years, yet he still surprised them. He was never trying to win the battle in front of him. He was already fighting the next one. Far away, inside the walls of Samarkand, Shah Muhammad desperately tried to restore confidence. The city's streets remained crowded. Its markets were still open. Its towers still reached proudly into the sky. But something had changed. People whispered instead of laughed. Merchants packed their valuables. Families stored food inside their homes. The stories arriving from Bukhara grew darker with every passing day. They crossed the desert. They never stopped riding. They appear where no army should exist. No one knew which stories were true. That uncertainty became another Mongol weapon. Fear filled the gaps where facts were missing. The Shah walked through his palace surrounded by advisors. Each offered different advice. Gather every army, defend the capital, negotiate, retreat. Every voice demanded a different path. The emperor listened, but confidence had already begun slipping away. For years, he had ruled through authority. Now, he found himself ruled by doubt. Late that night, unable to sleep, he climbed onto the palace walls. In the distance, beyond the quiet countryside, countless campfires flickered against the darkness. At first, he believed they belonged to shepherds. Then a guard whispered, "My lord." The Shah turned. Those fires were not there yesterday. Silence fell, because everyone understood what that meant. The Mongols had arrived. At dawn, the horizon came alive. Thousands of horsemen emerged from the morning mist. Then thousands more rows of mounted archers stretched across the plains until they disappeared into the distance. Their discipline was terrifying. No shouting, no disorder, only steady movement, like a tide that could never be pushed back. From the walls of Samarkand, the defenders stared in disbelief. One soldier quietly muttered, "It is as if the earth itself has chosen to ride against us." Samarkand was unlike the smaller cities the Mongols had conquered. Its walls were immense, its garrison numbered in the tens of thousands. War elephants, captured from earlier campaigns, stood inside the city as living weapons. Defenders believed these enormous animals would terrify Mongol horses. Perhaps they would, perhaps not. Genghis had learned long ago that every weapon had a weakness. The siege began. Trebuchets hurled stones through the air with deafening crashes. Arrows filled the sky from sunrise until sunset. Chinese engineers directed the construction of siege equipment, while Mongol cavalry sealed every road leading out of the city. No supplies entered, no messengers escaped. Day after day, the circle around Samarkand grew tighter. Inside the city, hope slowly began to crack. The defenders were brave, no one could deny that. Again and again they launched attacks against the Mongol lines. Again and again they were driven back. Food grew scarce. Water became precious. The wounded filled every available building. The smell of smoke and dust lingered constantly in the streets. Yet the greatest enemy was not hunger. It was uncertainty. No one knew how long they could endure. No one knew whether help was coming. Because no help was coming, the Shah had already made another terrible mistake. Instead of riding to defend his greatest city, he fled. When word spread that the emperor had abandoned Samarkand, disbelief turned into despair. Some refused to believe it, others shouted that it was a lie. But the truth could not be hidden. Their ruler was gone. He had left behind his strongest city, and the people inside it. Confidence vanished almost overnight. Some officers argued for surrender. Others demanded one final attack. Arguments replaced unity. Exactly as Genghis Khan had hoped, because walls protect cities, only leadership protects people. Several days later, part of the garrison attempted a desperate breakout. Thousands of cavalry thundered through the city gates, hoping to shatter the Mongol lines. At first, it seemed to work. The Mongol front withdrew, the defenders cheered. Victory felt possible. Then the retreat continued farther than expected. The cavalry pursued. Faster, farther, the dust swallowed both armies. Suddenly, signal horns echoed across the plains. Fresh Mongol cavalry erupted from both flanks. The trap closed. Within minutes, the attackers found themselves surrounded. The same tactic that had destroyed the Jin armies now shattered Samarkand's best defenders. Few escaped. Those watching from the city walls understood immediately. Their strongest soldiers were gone. The city had lost its shield. Not long afterward, the gates were opened, some by negotiation, some by force. The Mongol banners rose above Samarkand. The jewel of the Khwarezmian Empire had fallen. For centuries, travelers had spoken of its beauty. Now, it belonged to Genghis Khan, yet once again, he sought out more than treasure. He ordered skilled craftsmen, engineers, architects, and artisans identified and spared. Many were sent east to serve the growing Mongol Empire. Knowledge, like gold, was something Genghis refused to waste. His empire expanded not only through conquest, but by gathering the talents of every civilization it encountered. Meanwhile, Shah Muhammad rode westward in desperate flight. Every day brought another report of defeat, another lost city, another army scattered. He no longer knew where safety existed. The empire he had ruled only months earlier was collapsing behind him. His advisors abandoned him one by one. Governors stopped answering his messages. Even loyal commanders began thinking first about their own survival. The emperor who had once declared to let him come was now doing everything possible to avoid meeting Genghis Khan. When news reached the Mongol camp that the Shah had escaped, many generals expected Genghis to celebrate the capture of Samarkand instead. He did the opposite. He summoned two of his greatest commanders, Subutai, Jeb. They stepped forward. You will find him. Neither asked how far, neither asked how long. They simply bowed because they understood their Khan's intention. A defeated enemy could recover. A fleeing emperor could rebuild an army. But a ruler who never stopped running would eventually lose everything. As Subutai and Jebe mounted their horses, they began one of the most extraordinary pursuits in military history, a chase that would carry them across mountains, deserts, forests, and thousands of miles. Behind them stood the greatest empire the world had yet seen. Ahead of them, a desperate emperor with nowhere left to hide. And before this relentless pursuit finally ended, the Mongols would ride farther than anyone had ever imagined possible, opening the door to lands that Europe believed were safely beyond the edge of its world. Shah Muhammad no longer rode like an emperor. He rode like a hunted man. The royal banners that had once announced his arrival were gone. The musicians, the grand processions, the endless lines of servants gone. Even many of the nobles who had sworn eternal loyalty had quietly disappeared during the chaos. Only a handful of exhausted guards remained. Every sunrise brought another rumor. The Mongols crossed the mountains. They're already ahead of us. They've taken another city. No one knew which stories were true. That was the terrifying part. The Mongols seemed to be everywhere. Far behind him, Genghis Khan did not personally lead the pursuit. Instead, he entrusted the mission to the two men he believed could accomplish what others considered impossible. Subutai, Jebe. They were different in temperament, but together they formed one of history's greatest military partnerships. Subutai possessed a brilliant strategic mind. He could study unfamiliar land only once and remember every river, hill, and valley. He thought weeks ahead, always imagining how an enemy might react before making his own move. Jebe was fearless. Years earlier, he had been an enemy during a battle against Temujin. One arrow had struck the Khan's horse, bringing it crashing to the ground. After the fighting ended, Temujin demanded to know who had fired the shot. Most men would have lied. Jebe stepped forward. I did. He expected death. Instead, Temujin admired his honesty. A man brave enough to admit the truth before his enemy was too valuable to kill. From that day forward, Jebe became one of his most trusted generals. It was another reminder of the principle that had shaped the Mongol Empire from the beginning. Loyalty mattered more than birth. Ability mattered more than pride. Subutai and Jebe rode west with roughly 20,000 cavalry. To many commanders, the number seemed dangerously small. They were entering unfamiliar lands, surrounded by potential enemies. Separated from the main Mongol army by hundreds of miles, yet they never hesitated, because they carried something greater than numbers, momentum. Every victory behind them made the next enemy less confident. Fear often arrived before the Mongols themselves. Their pursuit became legendary. The generals rarely followed the obvious roads. They crossed mountain passes local guides claimed were impossible. They forded icy rivers without waiting for bridges. When food became scarce, they hunted. When horses tired, they changed mounts. Day after day, week after week, they continued west. Villages awoke to find Mongol scouts already passing through before anyone realized an army was nearby. It felt less like chasing men and more like chasing the wind. Meanwhile, Shah Muhammad's world continued collapsing. Each city he reached offered fewer supplies than the last. Governors who had once welcomed him with elaborate ceremonies now hesitated before opening their gates. Some feared helping him would invite Mongol punishment. Others simply no longer believed he could save them. One evening, after riding until darkness covered the land, the Shah entered a small fortress near the Caspian Sea. He dismissed his guards and sat alone. For the first time in years, he was completely silent. He remembered the ambassadors, the caravan, the warnings he had ignored. He remembered laughing when people spoke of Genghis Khan. Now, every mistake stood before him like a ghost. Power had made him believe he could not fail. History had proven otherwise. Eventually, the emperor fled to a lonely island in the Caspian Sea. There were no magnificent palaces there, no cheering crowds, no throne. Only isolation. Cold winds swept across the water. The ruler of one of the richest empires on earth spent his final days surrounded not by glory, but by regret. According to historical accounts, Shah Muhammad died there in 1220, his empire shattered and his authority gone. He had feared meeting Genghis Khan on the battlefield. In the end, he never did. Yet the Khan defeated him all the same. When Subutai and JB learned of the Shah's death, they did not immediately return east. Most commanders would have considered the mission complete. The Mongol generals saw something else. Opportunity. The lands beyond the Caucasus Mountains were largely unknown to them. New kingdoms, new peoples, new possibilities. Rather than retracing their steps, they continued forward. It was an astonishing decision. Instead of ending one campaign, they quietly began another. Their army entered the rugged Caucasus, where towering peaks cut through the sky like the teeth of giants. The terrain was unlike anything the Mongols preferred. Narrow valleys replaced open grasslands, steep cliffs limited cavalry movement, ambushes became a constant threat. Several local kingdoms formed an alliance, believing the mountains would finally stop the invaders. For the first time in months, the Mongols faced an enemy fighting on ground of its own choosing. Subutai studied the situation carefully. A direct assault would cost too many lives. So he turned once again to a weapon stronger than swords: diplomacy. Accurate messages reached one of the allied tribes during the night. Promises were made. Old rivalries quietly encouraged. By morning, the alliance had begun to crack. Suspicion spread. One group withdrew, another hesitated. The united front disappeared before the battle even began. When the Mongols attacked, they faced divided enemies instead of one powerful force. Another victory, won before the first arrow flew. As they rode farther west, the Mongols encountered warriors unlike any they had faced before. The Asterisk Rus princes and their Asterisk-Cuman-Ostric allies. These were experienced fighters, heavily armored knights, powerful cavalry, infantry, carrying long spears and broad shields, confident in their own strength. The Cumans, driven from their lands by the advancing Mongols, begged the Rus' princes for help. "If they destroy us today," their leaders warned, "they will come for you tomorrow." After much debate, several princes agreed. A large coalition army assembled. Their commanders believed overwhelming numbers would guarantee victory. Subutai welcomed the news. Large armies often moved slowly. Large armies often argued. Large armies often believed they could not lose. He had seen that mistake before. The Mongols approached cautiously, then they retreated. For one day, then another, then another. The Rus commanders laughed. "They're afraid. Keep chasing them." For 9 days, the Mongols continued withdrawing across the open plains. The coalition pursued eagerly. Their formations stretched farther apart each day. Communication broke down. Different princes marched at different speeds. The disciplined army that had begun the pursuit slowly transformed into scattered groups, exactly as Subutai intended. On the banks of the Asterisk Kalka River, the retreat finally stopped. The Mongol riders turned, signal flags rose into the air, he units emerged from nearby hills. The trap closed with terrifying speed. The battle became a disaster for the coalition. Separated forces were defeated one after another. Some princes fought bravely until the very end. Others attempted to flee, but few escaped. The Mongols had once again demonstrated that patience could be deadlier than strength. When news of the Battle of the Kalka River spread across Eastern Europe, many dismissed it as an isolated raid. Surely the strange horsemen would return to the east. Surely this was only a passing storm. They were wrong. Subutai and Jabi eventually returned to Genghis Khan, bringing not only victory, but knowledge. They had mapped rivers, mountain passes, kingdoms, and roads. They had discovered the strengths and weaknesses of lands no Mongol army had ever entered before. Years later, that knowledge would become priceless, because the riders who had reached Europe were not the main invasion. They were only the scouts, and somewhere far away in Mongolia, Genghis Khan was already looking toward the next horizon, unaware that time itself was beginning to catch up with the man who had changed the world forever. The old warrior had spent his entire life chasing horizons. Now, for the first time, the horizon seemed to be chasing him. The victories continued. Cities still surrendered. Kings still whispered his name with fear. His empire stretched farther than any rider could cross in months. Yet Genghis Khan was no longer the young man who had escaped captivity by hiding beneath reeds in an icy river. Gray now touched his beard. The lines on his face had deepened. Years of endless campaigns had carved themselves into his body. But his eyes had not changed. They still carried the same quiet determination that had once belonged to a starving boy on the Mongolian steppe. Because some men grow old, others simply run out of time. When Genghis Khan returned to Mongolia after the Western campaigns, the celebrations lasted for days. Warriors embraced fathers they thought they would never see again. Children met brothers born while they had been away at war. The grasslands echoed with laughter, music, and stories of distant lands that seemed almost mythical. Cities larger than anything the Mongols had imagined. Rivers so wide the opposite shore disappeared into mist, deserts that swallowed entire caravans, mountains whose peaks remained covered in snow even during summer. The empire had changed forever, and so had its people. The once isolated tribes of Mongolia had become rulers of a world connected by conquest. Yet, while others celebrated, Genghis Khan remained restless. His closest advisors noticed it immediately. One evening, Subutai found the Khan standing alone upon a hill overlooking thousands of grazing horses. "You should be celebrating," Genghis smiled faintly. "I have celebrated enough victories." Subutai looked toward the endless horizon. "What troubles you?" The Khan answered without taking his eyes from the distant plains. "Empires do not die when their enemies defeat them." He paused. "They die when their leaders forget what built them." That concern had been growing inside him for years. His empire had become so vast that no single rider could carry messages from one end to the other without changing horses dozens of times. Governors now ruled lands whose languages they barely understood. Merchants traveled safely across territories that had once belonged to bitter enemies. The Mongol world was becoming something entirely new. But with every new conquest came another challenge. How could one man govern millions of people scattered across continents? Genghis knew the answer: he could not. The empire needed institutions that would survive after he was gone. So he began preparing for a future he would never see. Across the empire, a remarkable network began to expand. Relay stations appeared along major roads. Fresh horses waited at each station, food, shelter, supplies. Official messengers could now travel astonishing distances in only a matter of days. Ores from the Khan moved faster than ever before. News of rebellion arrived quickly. Merchants found safer roads. Diplomats crossed continents. With greater confidence, this communication system, later known as the *Yam, became one of the greatest administrative achievements of the Mongol Empire. It proved that Genghis Khan understood something many conquerors never did. Winning territory creates an empire. Connecting that territory keeps it alive. The Silk Road, which had suffered from years of conflict before the Mongol rise, slowly awakened once more. Caravans stretched across deserts carrying silk, spices, paper, porcelain, glass, precious stones, and countless other goods. A merchant leaving northern China could travel thousands of miles toward Persia under the protection of Mongol authority. Bandits who attacked traders faced swift punishment. For the first time in generations, merchants began speaking of something extraordinary. The roads felt safe, knowledge traveled alongside commerce, astronomers exchanged ideas, doctors shared medical practices, engineers introduced unfamiliar technologies, religious scholars debated peacefully in cities where people of many beliefs now lived together. The empire conquered with horses was quietly becoming an empire connected by ideas. But peace rarely lasts forever. Far to the southwest lay the kingdom of asterisk Western Jia. Years earlier, its rulers had accepted Mongol authority. They had promised military support whenever the Khan demanded it. Now, when Genghis called upon them during his campaigns, they refused. To many rulers, such defiance might have been ignored. To Genghis Khan, an oath meant everything. A promise broken by one kingdom could encourage rebellion across the empire. He could not allow that, not now, not after everything he had built. His advisors urged caution. You have fought enough wars. Let younger commanders lead. The empire needs you alive. Genghis listened patiently. Then he answered with the calm certainty that had guided him since childhood. If I stop defending the law, he looked around the room. Why should anyone continue obeying it? No one had an answer. The decision had been made, one final campaign. In the spring of 1226, the Mongol army once again began moving. Many of the younger warriors had grown up knowing nothing except victory. To them, marching beside Genghis Khan felt almost ordinary. The older veterans knew better. They watched their leader carefully. His movements were slower now. Long days in the saddle demanded greater effort. Occasionally, he paused longer than before while mounting his horse. Amjins had begun collecting its debt. Yet whenever the army started riding, he still took his place at the front, as he always had. The campaign against Western Xia was relentless. Fortresses surrendered one after another, fields were abandoned, cities closed their gates. The Mongol war machine that had transformed the world continued moving with frightening precision, but something had changed. Those closest to the Khan noticed moments of unusual silence. Instead of discussing the next battle, he often asked unexpected questions. How many horses remain? Have the wounded been treated? Did the messengers arrive safely? Years earlier, his thoughts had centered almost entirely on victory. They increasingly turned toward responsibility. Perhaps he understood what few others yet realized. His greatest battle was no longer against another empire. It was against time itself. Then came the accident. The exact details remain one of history's greatest mysteries. Some chronicles claim Genghis Khan was thrown violently from his horse during a hunt. Others suggest he suffered injuries during the campaign itself. Later legends offered far more dramatic explanations, but historians have found little evidence to support them. Whatever the cause, those around him quickly realized something was wrong. The Khan continued leading his army. He refused to show weakness before his soldiers, but his closest companions saw the pain hidden beneath his calm expression. One evening, after inspecting the camp, he entered his tent more slowly than anyone had ever seen before. Subutai quietly followed. "My Khan," Genghis looked toward his oldest friend. "If I do not return to Mongolia," Subutai immediately interrupted. "You will." Genghis smiled, not because he believed it, because he admired the loyalty behind the words. Outside the tent, thousands of warriors prepared for another day of conquest. None of them knew that the man who had united the Mongols, the man who had changed the course of history, was fighting the only enemy he had never been able to defeat. And before the next sunrise, the future of the greatest empire on earth would rest on a question no sword could answer. Who would lead after Genghis Khan? The camp was unusually quiet. There were no songs rising from the fires, no laughter between warriors. Even the horses seemed strangely restless, as if they sensed something their riders could not. Inside the largest tent, The man who had spent a lifetime chasing destiny now lay surrounded by those who had followed him across half the known world. Subutai stood silently near the entrance. JB was gone, having died years earlier during the Western campaigns. Buorchu, one of the Khan's oldest companions, lowered his head, unable to meet his leader's eyes. His sons stood nearby, strong men, victorious men, yet in that moment they were simply sons watching their father fade. Genghis Khan opened his eyes. The pain had become impossible to hide. But his voice remained calm. For a long time he said nothing. Instead, he looked at the faces around him. Some had ridden beside him since the days when he owned nothing. They had survived hunger together. They had escaped death together. Together, they had built something no one had believed possible. Finally, he spoke. "Do you remember?" A faint smile appeared. "When we had only a handful of horses?" Several men quietly nodded. "And everyone said we would fail?" No one answered. There was no need. They remembered every cold night, every desperate battle, every friend they had buried beneath the endless sky. The empire had not been born from wealth. It had been born from sacrifice. History records that before his death, Genghis Khan made one final decision that would shape the future of the empire. His successor would not be the eldest son, nor simply the strongest. He confirmed that Ogadai, his third son, would become the next great Khan. It was a practical choice. His eldest son Jochi had died earlier, in 1227, after a long period of tension with his father. His second son Chagatai was courageous but often quick-tempered. Tolui, the youngest, was an exceptional commander but supported his brother's succession. Ogadai possessed something different: patience, balance, the ability to keep powerful brothers united. Genghis understood that conquering the world had been difficult. Keeping his family from tearing it apart might prove even harder. In August 1227, during the campaign against the Western Shah, Genghis Khan died. He was believed to be around 65 years old. The exact cause remains one of history's enduring mysteries. Some historical sources suggest illness. Others mention injuries sustained after a fall from his horse. Centuries later, legends added dramatic stories, but none have been confirmed by reliable evidence. The truth disappeared with the men who guarded his final moments. According to long-standing tradition, his death was kept secret until the campaign ended. The army continued fighting. The enemy never realized the man leading them was already gone. Even in death, his final order was obeyed. The Mongols completed the conquest of Western Xia. Only then did the news begin to spread. It traveled slowly at first, from commander to commander, from camp to camp, from one relay station to the next. The reaction was unlike anything the empire had ever witnessed. Hardened warriors who had never cried on the battlefield wept openly. Some removed their helmets and stood in silence beneath the endless blue sky. Others rode away alone, unable to accept that the man who had seemed larger than life was gone. Across Mongolia, people remembered not only the conqueror, but the hungry boy who had refused to surrender. His burial became one of history's greatest mysteries. No contemporary source identifies his tomb. According to tradition, his funeral procession traveled back toward Mongolia in secrecy. Legends claim those who witnessed the burial revealed nothing of its location. Some stories even say the ground was concealed so completely that no trace remained. Whether those stories are true or not, one fact remains. More than 800 years later, no one knows with certainty where Genghis Khan was laid to rest. The man who built the largest contiguous empire in history left behind no known monument. Perhaps that is fitting, because his greatest monument was never made of stone. It was the empire itself. The following year, the Mongol nobles gathered in a grand Kurultai, the traditional assembly where matters of leadership were decided. The atmosphere was tense. The empire stretched from the Pacific to Central Asia. Its future depended upon unity. One careless decision could undo everything Genghis had built. After long discussions, the nobles honored his final wish. Ogadai Khan became the new great Khan. Many expected the empire to weaken without its founder. Instead, it grew even larger. Under Ogadai's leadership, The Mongols completed the destruction of the Jin dynasty in northern China. At the same time, armies rode west once more. Subutai, now one of the greatest generals in history, planned campaigns that stunned every kingdom in Europe. Mongol horsemen swept through the lands of the Volga Bulgars. They defeated powerful coalitions in Eastern Europe. In 1241, they crushed European armies at the battles of Astris Legnica and Astris Mohi, demonstrating once again the speed, discipline, and strategy that had become the Mongol hallmark. Across Europe, fear spread just as it once had in Asia. Church bells rang. Kings called emergency councils. People wondered whether the end of their world had arrived. Yet fate intervened. When Ogedei died in late 1241, many Mongol princes returned east to participate in the selection of the next great Khan. The advance into Europe slowed, not because the Mongols had been defeated, but because the politics of succession demanded their presence. History itself changed course. Years later, another grandson of Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, completed the conquest of southern China and founded the Yuan dynasty in 1271. The Mongol Empire reached an astonishing scale, though it eventually divided into separate khanates. Its influence endured, flourished across Eurasia. Ideas, inventions, religions, technologies, and cultures traveled more freely than they had in centuries. The Silk Road entered one of its most active periods under Mongol protection, connecting civilizations from East Asia to Europe. Today, more than 8 centuries after his death, the name Astris Genghis Khan still inspires fascination. To some, he remains a ruthless conqueror responsible for immense destruction. To others, he was a visionary leader who united divided peoples, transformed military strategy, and reshaped global history. Both views contain elements of truth. His campaigns brought unimaginable suffering to many. They also changed commerce, diplomacy, communication, and cultural exchange across continents. His legacy cannot be reduced to a single word. It is too vast, too complex, too deeply woven into the story of humanity. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The starving boy abandoned on the Mongolian steppe could never have imagined that one day kings would fear his name, scholars would debate his legacy, and millions would still tell his story centuries later. Empires rise. Empires fall, cities are built, cities turn to dust, but some names echo forever. And as long as the wind continues to sweep across the endless grasslands of Mongolia, carrying whispers through the same plains where a young Temujin once struggled to survive, the story of Genghis Khan and the empire he forged against every impossible odd will never truly end.